I'm head of the Ahmed Iqbal Race Centre. We're part of the University of Manchester Library Special Collection and its sister organisation, the Education Trust. I'm also part of the People's Powerhouse Racial Justice Network, and it's on behalf of them. I'm really delighted to welcome you all today. I've also just seen Edna, who's the chair of the People's Powerhouse there, so I'm sure she'll join me in welcoming everybody. We all know that good housing is a key determinant of good health, and this has sadly been tragically demonstrated in recent years with the Grenfell fire, the work of Kwejo Twenboa's fight for justice against Clarion Housing, and the horrible neglect that caused the death of 2-year-old Awab Ishaq. Now, the UN Special Rapporteur declared recently that human right to adequate housing is the right of every woman, man, youth and child to gain and sustain a safe and secure home and community in which to live in peace and dignity. So what we're sort of hoping to do today is really understand what this means for the North and for people of Black, Asian and global majority backgrounds. The Manchester Mill's recent article about homelessness and temporary accommodation found that over 60% of those in temporary accommodation were from global majority groups. So in our event today, we hope we can explore what the causes of structural racism in the sector are, how this intersects with housing, and then explore some of the potential solutions and answers, hopefully. You know, no small task, but I'm sure we'll get that done. So we're going to hear from two amazing speakers. We've got Khem Rogaly from Commonwealth, who was one of the authors of What's Causing Structural Racism in Housing, and Wan Abdullah, who's going to talk about her lived experience of living in temporary housing while seeking asylum in the UK. We're going to then sort of have an opportunity to take some questions from our speakers. And then we're going to break into, I think, 3 groups, depending on the size, 3 breakout groups, so we can have a bit of more sort of smaller groups where we can talk about experiences and sort of maybe explore some of those solutions and any actions that we're working on to bring racial justice in housing. Is that okay? Have we let everybody in now, Ruth? Yeah, okay. So I'm going to move on now to introduce our first speaker, Khem Rogaly. Khem was the lead author of the Joseph Rowntree Foundation report, What's Causing Structural Racism in Housing. The report focused on the impact of race, class and migration status on the access to affordable, good quality homes in the UK. Khem now works as a researcher at the think tank Commonwealth, where his research currently focuses on ensuring justice for workers in carbon-intensive industries during the climate transition and the role of public ownership in decarbonisation. So I'm going to say welcome, Ken, and hand over to you.
Thanks so much to everyone at the People's Powerhouse for having me. It's great to be part of this, and yeah, really looking forward to the conversation later on. So I'm just going to speak for about 10 minutes about a piece of research I did in 2021 with colleagues at the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, and really to give you guys a general overview of the research, and if people have more specific questions later on about the data and things like that, we can also cover those. So what we were really intending to do in writing the report was to show and kind of create a new set of data to show how race, class and migration status interact to shape people's access to affordable and secure housing in the UK. And really we wanted to kind of build up that evidence base to show how those factors work together. We were looking probably more at racial inequality at this structural level, rather than looking at direct sort of cases of racism within the housing system, which we all know are prevalent and very important, but that's obviously something that deserves a lot of attention alongside this. So kind of really understanding how those 3 things, race, class and migration status, operate together is at the core of this. Race and income and class specifically cut across people's experience of housing in this country. Even if you just take people on low incomes, on the kind of the lowest income quintile, For instance, racialized people at that lowest income point are more likely to be disadvantaged in housing compared to white people. And what I mean by that is they're less likely to have access to affordable housing. When we talk about having access to affordable housing, what we basically mean is someone having to pay more than a third of their income on rent. And that kind of disparity reflects how race operates in connection with class inequality. And we'll also talk about how it operates in connection with migration status to structurally exclude people from having access to affordable housing and having access to secure housing in the UK. So what I'll do is I'll start with a kind of a brief snapshot of the history and the present of racial inequality in the housing system in the UK. And then I'll touch on the kind of three key areas that we focused on in our report. And those are basically the interaction between racial inequality at work and access to affordable housing, the social security system and how that affected people's access to affordable housing, and also immigration policy and the effect of specific migration policies on how people can access affordable and secure homes. So to really just give you a snapshot of that history, these kind of structural inequalities in the housing system have really deep roots. If you look at the increased migration of people who were often citizens of the British Empire and later Commonwealth subjects following the Second World War, you can really see in kind of two areas, both at a local authority level and at a national level, how policy drove discrimination against racialized people. So for instance, at the local authority level, in the early 1970s, some councils had dispersal policies. For instance, in Birmingham, what this meant was that there were limits on how many Black tenants could live in certain estates. So that in the Birmingham Council limited it to 1 Black tenant per every 6 white tenants, which obviously created a structural effect in how much people could access social housing. They abandoned that policy in 1975, but then what they continued to do was sort of impose racism through the housing officers working for the council. So they would kind of adjudicate based on the tenants' housekeeping standards, which often would be kind of grounded in racist criteria and bar people from accessing the best quality of social housing. At a national level, in 1971, legislation created something called no recourse to public funds, which basically bars people from having access to either social security system or social housing. And in its original form, that legislation was basically designed to stop Commonwealth citizens, former citizens of the British Empire, who didn't have parents or grandparents born in the UK from accessing social housing and the social security system. And that was specifically designed to exclude basically racialized people rather than people from countries like Australia who tended to be white. And we'll see later on how much that has an effect on people's access to affordable homes. But at present, where you can really see these legacies is across the system. So racialized groups other than the Indian community are more likely to be living in the private rented sector, less likely to be homeowners. This obviously means that you have less affordable and secure housing. Or in terms of housing quality, 24% of people in the Bangladeshi community, according to government data, live in homes counted as non-decent compared to 18% of white British people. Ethnic minorities are more likely to live in overcrowded homes, and recent report by a group called Positive Money showed that they have the fastest falling home ownership rate of any group. And our data at JRF basically looked partly at the rates of evictions in different areas. And what we found was that outside of London, in all but one of the 10 most diverse local authorities, eviction rates were significantly higher than in the 10 least diverse local authorities. So you can already see here, there's a picture of basically how the housing system is kind of driving insecurity and a lack of affordability for most racialized groups. And the Indian community is slightly different because they're much higher rates of home ownership. So when we're talking about this, a lot of our data wasn't including Indian people of Indian heritage as they're counted in government data. So to those three key drivers that we identified, inequalities at work, the social security system, and migration legislation. So to start with inequalities at work, I guess at the core of this is that most racialized people have lower average earnings and less access to secure work than white British people. This, alongside inequalities in transfers of intergenerational wealth, basically means that people are less likely to have access to home ownership, which, as the housing system is currently constructed around home ownership being the most secure, affordable form of housing, basically it causes those sorts of inequalities in living in unaffordable housing. I mean, to give you guys just a little snapshot, just under 1 in 5 Bangladeshi workers and over 1 in 10 Pakistani workers are paid below the national minimum wage, compared to 3 in 100 white workers. So you can see there where those inequalities at the workplace are, and kind of how that will then feed into inequalities in housing. And what our analysis then showed was that racialized workers in the lowest paid occupations were more likely to live in unaffordable housing than white workers in equivalent occupations. Moving on to the social security system, our analysis basically focused on one policy, which was the benefit cap as an example. And it's important to note that this is the area that kind of, this affects people who do have access to the social security system, who aren't excluded from that and social housing. But the benefit cap limits those households' ability to meet their housing costs, and it disproportionately affects racialized people. Basically, if you are affected by the benefit cap, it caps your access to social security for couples or single parents with children to 22,000 for people living outside of London. And when the Department for Work and Pensions analysed this policy in 2016, they noticed that it has disproportionate effects on racialised people. Our analysis confirmed this, and the DWP decided to do nothing about their findings, but we basically confirmed that 8 in 20 households affected by the benefit cap were from racialised groups, compared to the fact that only 3 in 20 households are from racialised groups overall. And this can have a really significant effect on people's ability to meet housing costs. There's someone from Shelter here, and Shelter analysis in 2018 showed that the gap between rent and housing benefit for families who were capped for more than 6 months was £3,750 on average. So that part of the social security system is having a real effect. And then we can move on to migration policies, which have a serious effect on people's ability to afford housing. The no recourse to public funds policy, which now basically affects most people who have temporary migration status in the UK and stops them from having access to social security or social housing. That's more than 1 million people, has a huge impact on both housing affordability and also overcrowding. So for instance, more than 1/3 of racialised workers outside of London affected by no recourse to public funds live in unaffordable housing. That's compared to 1 in 10 white workers, and that was one of our sort of key findings. There's also surveys that were done during COVID. More than half of respondents found that people with no recourse to public funds said it would be impossible to isolate within their own homes. So you can see there that it's got a massive effect on people's quality of housing and their health, as well as how much they can afford housing. Then there's right to rent policy, which was basically introduced as part of the hostile environment set of legislation, and it made it illegal for landlords to rent to tenants who do not have leave to remain in the UK. And even when the government were piloting this, the Joint Council for the Welfare of Immigrants showed that the policy would have significant effect in driving direct racist discrimination against tenants. They found in a survey of landlords in Birmingham that more than 1/4 of landlords responded that they wouldn't engage with people with foreign accents or foreign sounding names. So therefore showing that government policy at that sort of structural level would be driving racist discrimination, stopping people from accessing secure and affordable homes. So that's a kind of a snapshot of our report and a kind of clear data in the barriers that racialized people face in accessing affordable and secure homes. You can see that through inequalities at work, through the social security system, and through migration policy. And there's also, many other factors at play, but that was kind of where we decided to focus ourselves. And yeah, looking forward to kind of talking about any more of the specifics with you all in our breakout discussion. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Khem. That was really, really interesting. There's a lot of information in there. If anybody's got any questions, if you can pop them in the chat, and we'll get back to them when both our speakers have finished. Okay, so I'd like to welcome our second speaker, Wan Abdullah. Wan has been seeking asylum in the UK for 4 years. She fled domestic abuse in 2019, and while waiting on her status from the Home Office, Wan has moved from place to place around the UK, including in temporary hotels with her young son. Wan is looking for changes and improvements in the system, but despite these challenging circumstances, she is also an ambassador for her football club, Holbeck Moor FC women's team, who recently won an award, making them the first women's team to become a football club of sanctuary. So I'd really like to welcome Wan now.
Thank you, Doctor. Hi, everyone. First of all, pardon my English. I'm quite, I might be messed up with the grammar, try my best. So I'm Wan. I originally from Malaysia. I came to UK on 2019 with my ex-husband and my 3-year-old son that time, and I was 10 weeks pregnant. Just a little bit introductions about me, and I'm quite struggling with my mental health, but I wasn't really aware about that. So I've been in an abusive relationship for quite some time, but like I say, I never aware about that. So when I reached on the second day in London, I had miscarriage of my pregnancy, and I'm also have another children from my previous marriage. And I lost one of my sons last 5 years ago. So it's quite a challenge for me to lose another pregnancy. So that's how it started when I not voluntarily came to UK, because I have no idea about what is seeking asylum, all these things. My ex-partner, he's the one who want to ask asylum in UK. I just depending on him. Somehow, when he passed over, he's required in the airport to seek asylum. We've been asked to finish the money first, because we have a certain amount of money, so we cannot be bring to the temporary camp according to the borderline officer. So we've been staying in the hotel for a few days before we home office people come and pick us. It was the first camp in Croydon. We stayed there for almost like 4 days. It's quite a jam and pack accommodations with a family, and there's many people as well there. And we have to walk for almost like 20 minutes for meal, because they don't have any kitchen or pantries accommodation inside the camp. So we have to walk like almost 20 minutes a day. And I just miscarriage, and I've been DNC. I was really poorly, not really feeling well. I really struggle with that. And it was really a challenge for my ex-husband as well, because my 3-year-old, and the things that also the weather really not suit with me. I did not have a proper clothes, because my country is tropical weather. In here, it was, even we came during the summer, but I didn't expect that the weather would be super cool, because in my country, the air conditioner is, the minimum is 16. Summer in UK was like 13 or 9. I was really freezing that time, and that would not really help with my health conditions. But somehow during the struggle, we've been accepted, the process been accepted. Then we have to move from Croydon temporary camp to another places, which is we're not even been told where. It's just like they just told us to pick. So basically we don't have a choice. So then it's come to happen in a Wakefield on the other side of UK. Then it was a very old temporary accommodations, to be honest. Our room is very rusty, the sink, everything is broken. But there is a canteen, something like that, but it's so crowded. But somehow I feel grateful, because it wasn't COVID that time. 2019 is still fine, but we have to queue for very long. Children are crying along during the queuing, and also there is a fight because it's mixed with the individual and family. So it's not really something that we expected to happen. And some more, I'm very struggled with my mental health. I fall under grief very badly that time. and I wasn't really good in psychologically. But somehow, after a few months there, we've been received a letter that we'll be dispersed now to a house, and then it come to happen. It's on place called Barnsley, and that's the journey that we also been told that we will be placed under Section 95, which is we entitled for housing. We have allowance weekly money, but it's all depend on my ex-husband that time. So me and my son will be receiving the allowance money through him. Somehow the house in Barnsley is not so bad, even though it's old. It has a big garden, but very old house. But it's very far from the Barnsley town. We live in that time when the £35 per week, and then we have to pay for the bus £5 for the groceries, because it's quite isolated. It's near the lake, very beautiful during the summer, but it's totally out from any groceries thing. So we have to travel, and that money that we have is everything for food, for buses. All that was really a challenge. Then somehow I managed to get help on my mental health, because I've been told also about so-called GP during the briefing. So that's also how I know about the health system in UK. But then also I been registered with Refugee Council in Barnsley that time, and then that's how I come to a women's group who's talking about domestic abuse, so on. Cut it short, I managed to flee from my ex-husband, because I think it's not something healthy for me to stay in an abusive relationship. So while I was waiting for Home Office to pick me, because now I have to have my own case, because I was dependent, but when I fled from him, I'm undocumented. So it was really hard time for me, because I have to hide from him as well in Barnsley, and I have no place. I've been homeless for 5 days because of waiting for Home Office to pick me. I've been in the library, in the train station, just go to another asylum house to sleep per day. And I was really sick because I'm using public toilet. And only on the fifth days, I just could not help myself, because I've been waiting. And then I just go to police station in Barnsley. It was surprised because it was closed, because in my country, police station is 24 hours open. So I have to wait for police to someone to come over. And then when when there's some officer came, when I say I want to ask asylum, it was a man officer. And then I told I'm flipped domestic abuse. He was not really kind. And then somehow there is a police woman came, and seems like she's aware about domestic abuse thing. So she managed to get me a temporary hotel under, I don't know, but not under Home Office, because I undocumented. So she managed to get help and put me in the Sheffield hotel for 2 days. So there she told me that I need to go to Sheffield Housing to let them that I'm homeless. But I have no document. I don't have any document at all. So after 2 days, it was Monday, because she put me in the temporary hotel in Sheffield. It's Saturday, Sunday. So that's a small thing, but I really appreciate her help. Then on Monday, I went to Sheffield Council to ask, and then they said they cannot process my things, because I'm not documented. I don't even have a proper process. But somehow I managed to keep calling migrant help, because this is the number that I know. That's then they said they will send somebody from logistic called Moor's Logistic to pick me. But I was so sick, been 7 days so sick. I was walking to the emergency hospital to get help, because I could not walk. And then I would go wrongly to the emergency hospital in Sheffield. And there is a nice lady said, this is not the emergency, but if you cannot walk, I will call you an Uber. I said, I don't have money or anything, but she's really, I never forget her help. So she called me an Uber, and I went there. Then on the night, the Moor's logistic come and pick me from emergency in Sheffield. Then I've been put it again in Wakefield temporary camp. So there I processed my asylum and I managed to get a appointment for my interview. So while I was there, I getting to know about many laws about domestic abuse, victim support. I really appreciate that. And after a few months, I've been dispersed to Leeds. That's how my journey started. It was a shared accommodations with another 5 women. It's a very old house. The garden was so scary, like in the horror movie. So, but we are grateful because at least I have a room to stay. But it's quite a poor management because we try every time we try to get report some damage, we have to wait a long queue on the call to migrant help because we don't have a direct access to MEA's housing. We have to go through migrant help. And it took hours, sometimes day. We could not get it. And the manager sometimes came once in the blue moon, every 2-3 months. It's really difficult to survive in those things. Somehow I struggle to get in touch with my other sons. So I somehow cut it short. I reconciled with my ex-husband and then I got pregnant. So when I was get pregnant on lockdown 2020, it was really a massive attack on my mental health because I have post-traumatic stress disorder very badly. I got triggered with man voice. I got triggered even with neighbor passing. As long as men, I got triggered. And every week I went to symptoms hospital because I have very poor panic attack and anxiety attack and uncontrolled. So I've been putting under perinatal mental health, and my doctors and my GP being very helpful since first trimester. I got pregnant, write a letter, like an email to a home office to move me from the shared accommodations because I'm not suitable to live in the shared accommodation due to my mental health conditions, very poor in my pregnancy. But it's really difficult. It's about like when I got the decision, it's already 9 months. I'm already overdue. I was like 42 weeks. Then they told me they're going to move me to my house. And when I was repacking all my things, my water broke. So the day that I'm supposed to move out from the shared accommodation, I about to give birth. So 3 a.m. in the morning, I rang midwife house, midwife department in the St. James, telling that my water broke, but I'm not coming yet. But somehow she said, you are high risk mom because I'm mother of 8 children. So I have to come to the hospital as soon as I can. I say, no, I'm going to wait for the MEAs to come take me because I'm not coming back to this house while I'm discharged when I give birth to my baby. It's really quite hustling. And somehow the van driver helped me to load. My housemate also helped me to load all my stuff and put it in there. Then I told the van driver, could you please help me all this food that I'm already prepared. So just leave everything on the living to the new house. So when I come back, I can just do my things. And he's very generous, he's very helpful. So when I came, somehow after I gave birth, I have a conflict again with my ex-husband regarding my baby. So he been harassing me for quite some time. So I've been put under safeguarding. So that's why I've been moved again. Police try to move me again because try to avoid him to keep harassing me and my baby. My baby was 3 months. I will be moved because I'm an asylum seeker. So when police ring a housing charity, they said I'm asylum, so I'm not entitled for any sanctuary or normal sanctuary like local people in Leeds. So I have to deal with the MEAs, the housing. So there is a welfare manager. They visited me and they said the only place available in Middlesbrough. So I wasn't thinking, I was really scared that I've been harassed. Then I went there, but somehow the camp is really totally isolated. You cannot get even internet. And everybody there is with the children and with the woman in domestic abuse. So what happened, the toilet is really far from the room and the room is so narrow. My son got traumatized a lot. He's just 3 months old. So I was struggling with my mental health because if I know that I'm going to be sent to those isolated, they say it's a safe place, but it's really compressing because I've been disconnected from my perinatal mental health. And I really struggle with my mental health. Plus, with my son, he was sleeping on my chest because it's really no place for him. It's so contempt. And then other people every night screaming and crying. And every time when I want to go to toilet, I have to carry him. I'm sorry to say, but I sometimes just do my things in the sink in the room because I cannot leave the room because the toilet was so far. And I've been calling my doctor, please help me. I've been calling, I start my football that time, but it's just in the beginning, been calling my coach because I try to work out with my mental health. So my doctor been calling everybody to bring me back to Leeds because my support system is in Leeds. It's so much distress because, you know, with the young children and my baby have a milk tolerance, they're so isolated from the places. 30 minutes, the nearest is to the Middlesbrough town. It was really not. And somewhere you have, I've been hyper-vigilant. I was scary to walk alone. It's really not an appropriate place for people who are looking for sanctuary, for people who want to feel safe. You told me that I'm going to be safe, but you put me in some place that's scary enough. I'm not even can afford to go out from the room. And also I have to bear about my son. But somehow I managed to come back to Leeds. And then a few months after that, my ex come to know again about my place. And then the safeguarding again happened. I have to move again. I was begging them, I don't want to move because police is really complicated to be sought out under because it's a criminal thing. He's harassed me, but police have a lot of things. I don't want to discuss about the police, but they insisted me to move out even I don't want to go. And they said many things, but they still asked me to come to go. Then they moved me to Bradford Hotel for temporary accommodation. Why? Because I say I have a court proceeding. I have my mental health support group in Leeds. I don't want to go out from Leeds because it's really too much for me from my first experience. But they still urged me to go. So when I went to Bradford, few days I'm there, my son was horrible. He don't like new, so the emotional distress on him is too much. It's affected me as well. So his father come to know again we are in the Bradford Hotel. And then I told the welfare manager about that, and then police are involved and they have to move us again from the short period of this. And I just been allowed to carry one bag for me, one bag for my baby. So we already don't have anything that we require, but living like a prisoner. I feel like I'm the one who I just need to go down there just to feel safe without not safety, not in peace at all. So when we moved to this another in Bradford area, come to happen, we've been put in the 3rd floor and there is a lift, but the lift not been used. So I've been asking the security, why you didn't use the lift? They said because of the management didn't allow to use it. My son, every day when we're using the stairs, screaming and crying. And not only me, there is a pregnant woman living there. There is a woman who have a leg problem. I've been talking with them, but the management did not really bother. I don't want to say they're not bothered because when I ask them, they say it's not something to reveal to me. But why you need to do hustle for people who are already hustling like us? And then somehow I just feel like, okay, this is only a temporary, I'm going to move. After a few months, I managed to get help from my doctor, from my football club, from the other volunteer organization. I moved back in Leeds. Somehow, while I was in Bradford, they forced me to come to the old house to pack my things. And they said they're going to put everything in the warehouse. And they promised me that I will be able to have access to it. So when I come back, I want to go there. They say I'm not allowed. I was like, how come I'm not allowed? You told me, because I wasn't agreed to go out from that property, but you forced me to go out. And then when you promised me that I have access to my things, but now suddenly you say I don't have access. So people say this is, and these people that I talked to, this is beyond my control. It's not my department, blah, blah, blah. I was really frustrated Then when I came to the house currently that I'm living, I'm grateful I'm not living in the hotel, because even though the house is broken toilet, dirty, smelly, it's really it's unexplainable. I've been on ITV before to show the house is very poor, but the point is, when I requesting to go and get myself my property from the previous house, they're not allowed me. And then when they send, I find out there's a half of my things not there. They didn't send. So it's okay. I say I will just put everything on the seller, because I rush to them on the next day when I come back, because Moors actually they have a key to every house. So I found my room, my door all open from inside, and then I realized the cellar door was open. And then I go down, all my things that I put on the midnight gone. I was devastated. I was falling down, because I did remember I called migrant help. I said, there is a lot of broken furniture. I'm very precise. There is a broken furniture in the bedroom. Nothing mentioned about the cellar. But come to happen, all my personal belonging, my luggage from my country, and all the unboxed and everything in the box gone. I was really frustrated. I was crying and crying because I don't know what to say. I'm living in the unfunctional house, and then the only thing that I received memorable from my country gone. Then when I called, they just, oh, we will do this 5 days, everything. So I received a letter because I raised a complaint to migrant help, and the letter was so no remorse, no nothing. They just mentioned we've been waste. Your things in the cellar will be waste in the bin, disposed. I cried because I don't know how can you come to my house even you have a key. That's my personal belonging there. I start to look for help, reaching help. I want to know what is the right as being asylum. I'm an asylum seeker. It doesn't mean that you can just come to my house, open my door, and took everything, my personal belonging. So they just reply me without remorse. I managed to get contact with many people in Leeds, and then only they reply me. They say, could you please list down? But I managed to get some information that is confirmed they dispose my things. Every time when I try to remember to make a list, I cry, I broke down. I left my country last 4 years ago. Everything I left behind. That's only 2 luggage. That's my special things. It might be not meaningful for other people, but that's the only thing that I have remained in me. And some people unhumanly just dispose it. I reported broken furniture. How come you're not being logic? The things that you took is not a broken furniture, it's a luggage and boxes. They just do it as like I'm nobody. I know I'm nobody in this country, but this is not right. Every person have a right. Even I'm asylum, I don't deserve to be treated at a double standard like this. So that's why I've been determined. Even though I could not make a list, because every time I try to make a list, try to remember, I broke down. I say there's no money can reimburse, there's no money can proceed. But I'm determined. I'm not going to let this be in vain without notice. So when I've been approached with one of my colleagues to talk about this, yes, I'm willing to come forward, because it happened again. It's not to me, but another family also been disposed. These some things that someone need to make a change and put a full stop to unorganized or whatsoever in your system. There is a broken system there. You know, this is your property. We are aware. We're living in your mercy, but the things that you throw is our personal belonging. It's not fair. We've been treated like a parasite already in this country, telling that we're taking tax money, what's so on, blah, blah, blah. We don't need this. The emotional damage that you did is and beyond. I can't even describe in words, because I could not even make it the list. But it have to become forward. Someone have to talk about it. I didn't expect to change the house provider or anything. I just want them to look into their system and make a change there, recognize it and make a change. So we actually can have at least some merciful life. That's what I want, that everybody come forward and make some change. It's not about hotel, it's not about things. It's about the management, how you manage your organizations. You've been telling that you are helping people. You know, UK is a hopeful country. We are third country who coming from Commonwealth country. So we not coming here to snatch people food or whatever. I came for help for century. So this is not how we've been supposed to be treated. We're not coming here to just receive all the allowance money, support money. We're not allowed to work. We want to contribute if we're allowed. We're not staying in the house for not doing nothing, getting fat or whatever. We want to contribute. So we already have struggled. I always told my peers that I refuse to be victim in the situations. So that's how I get involved with football, because it's really helped me. So I really work from almost last 2 years, working with moms, with the children, with the Holbeck Moor Football Club, to give some fund, some exercise, because, you know, Holbeck Moor football clubs, they provide crash, they provide also taxi fare or bus fare for asylum like us. We can't even afford a bus because our money is just limited like that. So that's how my football club have been recognized by City of Century UK. Is the first grassroots football that who encourage and who give dopamines, happy hormones to all the moms and asylum seekers. And we got the century of football century, and it was really honored to be part of that. And I also ambassador for City of Century, and also an ambassador for the Voices Network, because it became my passions, my determinations to help others and to make a change. We can make a big voice together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wan. Thank you so much for sharing your, incredibly challenging experiences. And it's really important that, you are given a platform to share your lived experience. And, it's so hard to talk about dehumanizing and, experiences like this, but, thank you for sharing it with such dignity. Thank you to both of our speakers. We're going to take a few questions.
Okay, thanks. Just to say, amazing from both our speakers. Thank you, really contextualizing this issue. Having chaired a housing association for quite a few years, I was struck by how strongly housing has become a commodity. And I think Khem just touched on it before. And the problem that we have is government policy around housing is about home ownership. And the government make absolutely no apology for that. And so we have got to be seeking different social policies that sees housing as a human right, rather than an asset or commodity that the bigger, the fancier, the better implies, your status in life. So I do think that there's a complete reset around our issue about social responsibility to house people, and so I'd like to hear from both of the speakers really about what you think we can be doing, because housing associations are a bit what's the word, they're actually not, that they're not really what they say they are. They are really interested in developing housing, and only a few very specialist housing associations do cater for people with very diverse backgrounds and so forth. So I think there's a real challenge to the social housing sector, and I'd really like to hear from the speakers how you think we could be taking that forward as a people's powerhouse.
I think, Edna's, what I'm always trying to hear that, because before this, nobody dare, or my peers, asylums to come forward and talk, complain, give feedback to them. So if you can be a voice to support whatever we're doing, because we are scared. Most of my friends scared to come forward and complain, fill in the form, because they fear their asylum decision will be affected by that, will be kicked out, become homeless. But there is something like we want it to be secure. There's a safe place that we can voice this thing out in the safe platform without jeopardize our status or our decision from home office or like this. It's something that acknowledge to let that this is human rights. We have a right to whatever things that happen in the housing. Because like I said, if I'm not being the person who been thrown the things, I would not know. I will still same by other asylum. But because the urge that I feel, this is not so, that's not fair. And when I do have my focus group now among the asylum to try to encourage them to make evidence, sharing what they're taught in my focus group. They're sending the picture, all this thing. So, but it's just like we didn't reach out to the correct organizations because we don't have some representative, or we don't have someone who dare enough to talk on our behalf and widely, openly accept. We like I said, I don't want to change the provider. I just want them to look into the system and make some improvement. Because nobody complained before, nobody come forward and say it. That's why they just feel like comfortable in this comfort zones. They can just do whatever they like to us.
Sure.
Yeah, I think, and I guess what I would add to that is that there are sort of different levels we need to be working on this. I saw someone on here was from Greater Manchester Tenants Union, part of a tenants union in London, and I think that the tenants and housing unions do fantastic work sort of on the ground in terms of supporting people and building the power of tenants as a collective to prevent some of these issues. But then at a wider and more of a national level, I think any campaigns that we can put forward to kind of mitigate the massive loss of social housing. I think it's 1.4 million social homes lost since 1980, and the transformation of this country into one that effectively you need to be a homeowner to have housing security in. The kind of conversion of the goal of housing to become a homeowner is the absolute priority, and I think obviously that new house building is one part of that, and new council and social home building. And as Commonwealth, we work a lot on public ownership and sort of understanding the role of the public sector in doing that. I think is very important, because at the moment the system for new home building is broken. I'd say that almost more of a priority in the short term is tenure shift of existing homes, and that's been touched on in the chat. And I think that regulation has a massive role to play in campaigning for regulation, basically so that private landlords, if they don't repair their homes, are forced to sell them onto councils at reduced rents to facilitate a tenure shift, then converting those into council homes. And there are other ways of doing that through getting hold of empty homes as well. Basically a range of solutions to facilitate that massive shift, I'd say, is absolutely essential, because otherwise these inequalities that we then see borne out across society affecting people at some of like the hardest edges of the system will just continue and get worse. And obviously the first step would be ending no recourse public funds, which stops people accessing the system in the first place.
Yeah.
And if I can add on a little bit more, because the rules, the regulation, what Khem is telling that here, if we ring a migrant help, we have to wait for 21 days for any repair or damage been done. And I check on Leeds House Federations, they will took over like 48 hours. Why they can't do the same thing? Why we have to have a double standard on this housing when it comes to asylum house? We have to wait for 21 days. And trust me, it's not even 21 days. It always goes to 1 month to 3 months. I have to stay for almost 3 months with a broken toilet. So it's really hustling with that. But why it need to have a different regulation? Why do we apply the same regulation like a normal people, like other people, residents in this UK? Yep.
Really, really good points illustrating the sort of the double standards there. Well, while we're waiting for people to come back in, I was wondering if I can ask Ruth and Frankie and Finn to just give a kind of one-sentence summary of sort of the main themes from their groups. We had some great discussions in our group. Maybe I'll go to Finn first.
Yeah, no, thanks, Safina. I think my main takeaway from our breakout discussion was the fact that at the minute we talk about housing in very quite corporate terms and in terms of financial assets, and we're really missing the people element from the conversation. I think that's, you know, where we as the People's Powerhouse movement can add value, in that we really want to recenter the conversation on it being about human beings who, you know, we have rights as human beings, and they're kind of lost in the conversation so much. So we really want to stress that from our conversation about the rehumanization. And I want to thank Wan again for sharing your story, because I found it very powerful, and there's a lot to take away, I think, for the next steps for our movement as well. Yeah, thank you. I'll pass on to the next group.
Thanks, Finn. Ruth?
Yeah, thanks, Safina. Yeah, again, a very interesting conversation, and thank you to those in my group who contributed. But I think the headlines, big one was about people who were in rented accommodation, whether that be social housing or private rented, about joining a union and the sort of collective power of people coming together in renters unions, looking at sort of the historical legislation that still exists that allows for racial discrimination to continue or to exist within our housing system. And we talked about the intersection and often how we, you know, housing works in housing space and health works in health space, but actually the intersection and the value of those groups coming together and collaborating. And Nigel made a really, really good point that a lot of housing decisions are made locally, and the power of organising and challenging whether it be planning permissions or decisions that at a local level can be really significant. And used an example of a group that organised in Hume in Manchester to oppose a student housing block that was going to be built there. And I can relate to that because there's a blooming lot of student housing in Manchester. So yeah, that was the main things from our group.
Great. Frankie?
We had a lovely conversation. Well, lovely. We had a great conversation in our group as well. We didn't get as far as solutions, unfortunately. I think that we didn't make it there. We talked about how hard it is if you don't have the correct language, or you've got no energy, or, you know, there's a billion other factors playing into your life, how hard it is to fight the fight, really, to, you know, assert yourself and get a lock on your door, get whatever it is you need, and where the support can be found to do that. We also talked about the sort of misconception that it's a great life because people are putting hotels. It's a really nice life with lovely bathrooms and, you know, room service and that kind of stuff. And this sort of sloppy language around how life is in reality. I don't know whether anyone wants to add from my group to what we discussed. No, you can take that as a brief synopsis then.
Thank you, Frankie. I was just going to add as well, one of the things that we talked about, as well as shifting the conversation, was about this mobilising and movement, and whether we know that the current government isn't really interested, and in fact it's their policy that's reinforcing the structural inequity that we're seeing. But, you know, one of the things that we're trying to look at is whether devolved governments or, you know, regional governments, whether they can be influenced more, and whether they're more open to a conversation and to lead in that change in policy, or maybe we can just up north do things differently, and demonstrate, you know, how we can have more equitable access to housing. Does anybody else want to add anything else in sort of final general sort of reflections or comments before I hand over to Ruth to kind of do a little bit of a wrap up? No? Okay, well, thank you all. I'm going to hand you over to Ruth now to finish off for us.
Yeah, it's just the closing housekeeping, really. So just to draw the event to a close today and say a huge thank you to Khem and Wan for their interesting and moving presentations, to all of our attendees for their participation and contributions, and to our wonderful chair, Safina Islam, for great chairing. Well done to Finn and Frankie, who it might not look it from their faces, but have been tech whizzes behind the scenes. I think Finn has dropped into the chat the links to sign up to our newsletter for information on future events and activities, and the details about, if you're from an organisation in the north, how you can add that organisation to our community map. If you'd like to get in touch with us about possibly writing a blog for the website, please drop your email in the chat. But just to say, we'll be sharing the recording with you all soon. And just an enormous thank you for joining us on what has been a really, really positive event this lunchtime. And hope you all have a very good rest of your day. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.